The Zerthian scientific expedition entered Earth's orbit with the calm detachment of a species that had catalogued thousands of worlds. Aboard their observation vessel, they prepared protocols for another routine entry in the Galactic Biodiversity Registry. Their analysis suggested a standard carbon-based biosphere with one dominant sentient species exhibiting early-stage Type 1 civilization behaviors. The presence of electromagnetic broadcasts, structured cities, and atmospheric manipulation confirmed the expected development pattern. What they hadn't anticipated was the rest of Earth. Initial atmospheric drones were deployed over what their instruments labeled as a dense equatorial growth zone, the Amazon rainforest. The Zerthians expected tranquility, photosynthesis cycles, docile herbivores, perhaps some territorial carnivores. Instead, the first drone's live feed displayed an ambush. A jaguar, silent as shadow, broke cover, clamped down on a capybara's skull, and vanished back into the undergrowth. The impact force exceeded 700 psi, enough to crush the drone's stabilizer. Damage reports came in seconds later. Observation halted. Not from technical failure, but from system-triggered hazard protocols. Further probes dispatched globally returned data categorized as inconsistent with expected apex dominance. From the African savanna, cameras captured lions coordinating flanks during a buffalo hunt, adapting on the fly when their first strategy failed. Near the Arctic Circle, footage showed orcas cooperating to create waves that swept seals from ice floes, behavior the Zerthians had only ever observed in intelligent, tool-using civilizations. South Pacific recordings showed mimic octopuses adjusting skin pattern, texture, and movement to deceive predators, sometimes even tricking prey species with near-perfect disguise. Each continent seemed to host entirely different methods of destruction perfected through time. Insects enslaved rival colonies. Amphibians secreted alkaloid toxins powerful enough to kill creatures thousands of times their size. Certain fungi hijacked host central nervous systems and forced suicidal behavior to propagate spores. Such phenomena had no place in Zerthian biological theory. A clear pattern emerged. Earth's evolutionary framework wasn't shaped by balance or harmony. It was built upon relentless conflict. In standard xenobiological terms, planetary ecosystems are rated on threat probability scales. Earth's initial categorization was Level 2, signifying moderate behavioral complexity and conventional predation. Within 3 Earth days of direct observation, it was revised to Level 5, non-technological hostile biosphere. That designation was reserved for worlds where the natural life itself was deemed hazardous at a systemic level. Earth, uniquely, met that criterion not because of one apex predator, but because nearly every level of the food chain produced organisms capable of lethal innovation. The Zerthians began classifying Earth's species under the term living weapons. They weren't weapons in design, but by function. Crocodilians, unchanged for millions of years, demonstrated ambush strategies indistinguishable from tactical AI-driven predators. Electric eels emitted sustained voltage shocks that could disable Zerthian surveillance nodes. Even plant life defied standard expectations. Venus flytraps and pitcher plants lured and dissolved prey. Some flora released airborne chemicals to manipulate animal behavior or summon indirect defense via insect mobilization. The rainforest didn't merely sustain life, it engaged in silent war with it. One research unit focused on avian species noted ravens engaging in multi-step planning, memory-based tool use, and cooperative theft. What disturbed the observers most wasn't intelligence alone, but how naturally these creatures incorporated deception, misdirection, and social manipulation into their instinctual behavior. Deception evolved independently on this world, not as anomaly, but as advantage. Marine exploration confirmed their worst fears. Deep ocean footage showed giant squids fending off sperm whales. Cnidarians used neurotoxins potent enough to shut down circulatory function in seconds. Bioluminescent species deployed distraction tactics with light bursts. Predators ambushed prey by mimicking harmless fauna. The ocean was not an alien sanctuary. It was a pressure-crushed, oxygen-starved trench filled with silent killers perfected by environmental hostility. By Earth's 5th orbital pass, the Xerthians withdrew all remaining field drones and transitioned to orbital-only observation. Standard protocol dictated passive monitoring of biological red zones. Earth was no longer a mere subject of interest, it was classified as a potential planetary hazard. Not due to its sentient species, but because the world itself represented an uncontained biosphere of aggressive, optimized evolutionary outputs. Their final internal report, transmitted across 12 sectors, carried the unprecedented assessment. Planet 293 Delta, known locally as Earth, displays ecosystem-wide convergence toward biological lethality. Hostile adaptivity present at micro and macro levels. Recommend no physical interaction. This is a planet that does not negotiate with survival. It dominates it. In the Galactic Zoological Assembly, where documentation spanned millennia, such phrasing had never appeared. The last line of the report, hastily translated by their communications array, marked a shift in how Earth would be viewed forever. This is not a world of life. It is a forge where death has been mastered. A single drone captured what became the most circulated feed across Xerthian science networks. A great white shark breaching vertically from the ocean, jaws clamping down on a seal with such force that the impact knocked the drone offline for 12 seconds. The creature's velocity and precision were labeled militarized biological kinetics. What disturbed the analysts wasn't the shark's strength, it was the efficiency. The apex predator didn't chase. It waited, calculated, and executed with surgical timing. This wasn't animalistic rage. It was cold-blooded mathematics. The savannah brought its own revelations. Lions coordinated complex maneuvers, boxing in buffalo herds with shifting flanks, rotating lead hunters, and responding dynamically to herd reactions. Observers assumed instinct until one lion altered course, anticipating a deviation before it occurred. This implied predictive processing. When compared to wargame AI simulations, the lion hunt scored an 87% tactical efficiency rating, a figure previously attributed only to trained combat algorithms. Elephants introduced a different form of horror. Drones recorded matriarchs recognizing bones of their kin, displaying prolonged mourning behavior, and, on more than one occasion, targeting human encampments in response to poaching. Their memory and retaliatory behavior placed them in the category of emotionally driven strategic actors. Xerthian scientists began calling them biogenerals, not as metaphor, but as operational classification. Underwater, the octopus shattered containment predictions. One individual in a marine research bay unscrewed lids, escaped multi-lock tanks, and disabled monitoring equipment by severing power cables with deliberate strikes. Its neurological complexity approached distributed computation models. Surveillance footage showed the same octopus mimicking flounder, sea snakes, and lionfish to avoid detection. It didn't just adapt, it manipulated its presentation to control perception. This alone forced a new classification, variable form intelligence with tactical morphology. Insects proved worse. Ant colonies operated like decentralized military nations. When a fire ant colony encountered rivals, they launched coordinated invasions, overwhelmed defenders, and enslaved the defeated to expand infrastructure. No individual ant understood the full scope. The colony itself behaved as a singular, adaptive war machine. The analog was disturbing, non-conscious actors forming emergent intelligence purely through scaled behavior. Further study revealed bullet ants using venom to incapacitate threats with compounds comparable to neuroinhibitors. Wasps injected eggs into live hosts, ensuring larvae emerged inside paralyzed prey. These actions weren't acts of violence. They were evolutionary blueprints for sustained biological torment. Cordyceps fungi operated on another level. By altering host behavior, they turned insects into living launch platforms for spore dispersal. The alien observers equated this to biological malware, self-replicating systems that hijack native controls and reprogram targets. Parasites like the lancet liver fluke manipulated ant behavior to ensure ingestion by cattle, completing their life cycle. These tactics were so complex they resembled psychological warfare. Terrestrial predators like wolves demonstrated long-range coordination, using topography and group dynamics to funnel prey into kill zones. Recorded hunts showed wolves taking shifts and adjusting positions based on visibility and scent markers. The pack didn't chase at random, they drove their quarry toward ambush vectors. Compared to Zerthian hunt drones, the wolves achieved similar success rates with zero technological aid. Chimpanzees revealed something more troubling: tool use, pre-battle displays, ambush planning, and intergroup warfare with border patrols. The boundary between animal and tactician blurred. In one instance, a group of chimps systematically isolated a rival male over several days, cutting off escape paths, and eventually executing a coordinated ambush. The event matched simulations of pre-modern conflict scenarios. On the Siberian tundra, surveillance caught a juvenile bear outmaneuvering an adult Siberian tiger. Analysts assumed luck until biomechanical modeling revealed the bear's movements included learned feints, directional bluffing, and obstacle use. This behavior suggested environmental awareness, adaptability, and situational manipulation in a non-sentient juvenile. It was not designed to survive. It was born to fight. Even prey demonstrated abnormal traits. The bombardier beetle expelled boiling chemical jets as a last-ditch defense. Arctic hares outran wolves across frozen terrain using erratic movement and heat dissipation tactics. The mimicry of harmless species like the milk snake, which copied the coral snake's color patterns, indicated a world where deception became mandatory for survival. To not deceive was to die. The final analysis presented to the Zerthian High Inquiry Board didn't highlight intelligence, technology, or communication as Earth's defining trait. It highlighted intent. Every creature studied, from apex hunters to microbial invaders, seemed to possess a singular directive: dominate or endure. Nothing submitted to odds. Nothing accepted fate. Survival wasn't passive, it was predatory, creative, and refined. What stunned the observers most was the consistency. Across oceans, deserts, jungles, and tundras, the same pattern emerged: autonomous life forms developing lethal solutions to environmental threats. Not by coincidence, but by relentless selection. Earth didn't favor balance. It forged violence into biology and called it nature. The final designation for Earth's fauna catalog was sealed by unanimous vote. Organic weapon-grade species spectrum. The implication was clear. Earth's creatures weren't just dangerous. They were prototypes of perfected biological warfare, born not from malice, but necessity. The reclassification of Earth's biosphere triggered panic in bureaucratic channels never designed for biological threats. The standard containment procedures for emerging civilizations were irrelevant. Earth's threat did not stem from its technology or territorial ambitions, but from its fauna's built-in capacity for war without awareness. Across the galactic assembly, a consensus emerged: understanding how this planet shaped such organisms was imperative. This initiated the anthropological directive: observation of the sentient species responsible for managing the environment. Expectations were moderate. What followed redefined every assumption. The first review of Homo sapiens began with their expansion history. Within a geological blink, humans moved from isolated pockets to global saturation. This spread came with a pattern: systematic confrontation with dominant predators, eradication or domestication of competitors, and manipulation of the environment at unprecedented speeds. Wolves became dogs, wild bovines became cattle, forests became controlled agricultural zones. Humanity didn't integrate with ecosystems, they reshaped them. Zerthian analysts noted that no species had ever overridden natural selection to this degree without genetic engineering. Homo sapiens achieved it through persistence, coordination, and tool augmentation. One alarming segment reviewed their hunting history. Homo sapiens were classified as pursuit predators, creatures that outran or outlasted prey. What made them unique was their reliance on endurance and strategy rather than speed or strength. Early humans tracked faster animals across vast distances, exploiting thermal inefficiency until the target collapsed. This form of hunting required stamina, memory, social cohesion, and the ability to read subtle environmental cues. Predators on other worlds evolved for bursts of destruction. Humans evolved for calculated attrition. As tools developed, so did their lethality. Spears, slings, bows, and traps emerged not from necessity but from experimentation. When an obstacle appeared, humans didn't adapt passively. They circumvented, subverted, or destroyed it. The most disconcerting detail wasn't their creativity, but their compulsion to optimize violence. Blade shapes changed based on prey density, weather, and enemy armor. Bows were refined into crossbows, then rifles, then automated systems. This transition occurred not in millions of years, but centuries. No species had ever moved from stone to orbit with such speed, all while preserving a mythos around struggle. Their military history solidified their classification. Every era of civilization included formalized conflict. Armies were organized, trained, and deployed not solely for survival but for dominance, ideology, or retaliation. Unlike predators that fought for territory or food, humans fought for belief, pride, vengeance, and resources. They didn't evolve to conquer, they refined it into ritual, structure, and doctrine. Their war logs spanned thousands of years, filled with endless adaptations, guerrilla tactics, psychological operations, scorched earth, siege warfare, cybernetic disruption. These weren't instinctive responses. These were engineered patterns. What stood out further was the capacity for destruction at scale. The development of nuclear technology did not emerge from necessity, but from theoretical exploration. The decision to weaponize it was a deliberate choice. Humanity possessed tools capable of erasing cities, oceans, or species, and retained them for decades under the doctrine of deterrence. The logic was not emotional, it was cold calculus. They maintained peace not through trust, but through the threat of mutual extinction. Zerthian review boards struggled with another anomaly, the duality. The same species capable of orchestrating genocides also performed acts of altruism with no genetic benefit. Humans rescued unrelated offspring, mourned distant tragedies, and risked death for abstract ideals. They created symphonies while building intercontinental ballistic missiles. Their literature conveyed despair, hope, cruelty, and compassion within the same breath. Such polarity defied modeling. Most species evolved along predictable patterns. Humanity oscillated between extremes with unnerving fluidity. The most confounding data came from human self-reflection. Entire disciplines, philosophy, psychology, ethics, were built not to manipulate external environments, but to understand internal contradictions. Humans questioned their own nature constantly, dissecting their violence, empathy, and ambition. They invented moral codes, broke them, rewrote them, and tried again. They didn't deny their instincts, they studied them. Some suppressed aggression through meditation, others explored it through sport or simulation. Where other species evolved to hide or dominate, humans evolved to question their role in doing so. Interrogation of cultural artifacts, films, books, myths, revealed patterns of glorified struggle. Their heroes were defined not by perfection, but by resilience through chaos. Battles, trauma, and loss were not narrative ends, they were transformative crucibles. In human stories, conflict was never fully avoided. It was survived, endured, or repurposed. The arc of their civilization was not one of peace, but of growth through adversity. The Zerthian Final Judgment classified Homo sapiens as a Level 7 adaptive hostile intelligence, a designation reserved for unpredictable, high-impact lifeforms with self-directed evolution. Earth's biosphere had been threatening. Humanity recontextualized it. They did not merely survive among predators, they surpassed them, inherited their lethality, and repurposed it toward abstract goals. It wasn't biology alone that made them dangerous. It was their willingness to refine brutality into discipline, and weaponize resilience as an instinct. The Galactic Security Accord convened an emergency session following Earth's full biological and anthropological review. The transcripts revealed a rare consensus. Earth was not to be considered for diplomatic contact, colonization, trade, or uplift. It would remain under permanent red zone quarantine. The designation was not fear-driven, but logical. Earth did not meet the criteria for standard threat deterrence. It was uncontainable through traditional suppression tactics. The threat was not in what humans had done, but in what they were willing to do, and capable of surviving. Simulations were run to test potential conflict scenarios. In every instance, when faced with superior force, human response patterns escalated rather than submitted. This was not reckless. It was strategic desperation. History proved it. Against empires, tyrannies, invasions, and extinction events, humanity's consistent trait was to resist until the opposition fractured, exhausted itself, or was redefined. When overwhelmed technologically, they adapted. When outnumbered, they leveraged terrain, misdirection, or morale. When broken, they rebuilt stronger, often angrier. It became evident that any direct confrontation would not end in human annihilation, but in mutual ruin. The psychological model was more disturbing. Human cognitive flexibility allowed them to accept suffering as fuel. Loss was not just processed, it was converted into collective momentum. Tragedy hardened resolve. Fear became a resource. Stories of resistance were passed through generations, not for glory, but as a warning and blueprint. A defeated human population didn't dissolve, it calcified. They remembered. They recalibrated. The term coined by the observers was cultural weaponization of pain. Comparative sociological studies across multiple galactic species found humanity uniquely willing to blur boundaries between civilian and combatant. In times of total war, every sector of human society became mobilized. Farmers became scouts. Children learned escape drills. Artists encoded resistance messages into music. The line between soldier and survivor dissolved. Unlike many civilizations, humans didn't isolate defense responsibilities, they distributed them. Resistance became instinctual, collective, and decentralized. Even when leadership collapsed, human groups spontaneously reorganized into defensive cells. This meant that eradicating command structures would not cripple human retaliation. It would merely fragment it into unpredictable threats. One counselor referenced humanity's spacefaring ambitions as the most unsettling variable. Despite possessing no biological adaptations for space, humans consistently pushed into hostile environments without genetic modification. Their bodies degraded in orbit, yet they returned. They endured radiation, isolation, mechanical failure, and still launched more missions. Zerthian analysts noted that humans viewed hostile conditions not as deterrents, but as invitations to innovate. Their space probes had already reached interstellar boundaries with no clear purpose other than exploration. The implication was clear: confinement wouldn't last forever. They would reach the stars eventually, not because of resources, but because of compulsion. Further data revealed humanity's use of simulation to rehearse extinction-level scenarios. Fictional media routinely depicted alien invasions, AI rebellions, viral pandemics, and apocalyptic collapses. These narratives weren't fear-driven entertainment. They were psychological drills. Each iteration presented solutions, survival strategies, philosophical evaluations, and emotional frameworks. Humanity didn't just imagine defeat, they practiced for it. Even in their darkest projections, the species rarely portrayed itself as extinct. Instead, they adapted or fought to the final individual. Analysts agreed: a species that rehearses its own end, and survives in imagination, is one that cannot be broken through conventional threat. Even their technological development patterns proved anomalous. Where other civilizations prioritized stability, humans accelerated disruption. Innovation cycles were driven by rivalry, necessity, or ideology, not safety. Technologies that posed existential risks, like artificial intelligence, nanotech, or genetic editing, were pursued without consensus. Regulation lagged behind ambition. They weren't reckless, they were restless. Risk was not an aberration, it was part of their creative DNA. Finally, their relationship with the concept of war differed from all documented species. For most, war was either an evolutionary artifact or a catastrophic lapse. For humans, it became ritualized, studied, and codified. They wrote doctrine on ethics within destruction. Geneva Conventions. Rules of engagement. Even in war, they sought order. But when those rules broke down, humans reverted instantly to raw, adaptive violence. They were not tethered to protocol. They could shift from structured defense to primal retaliation without hesitation. The Galactic Assembly's decision was unanimous and unchallenged. Earth would be monitored indefinitely. Human expansion beyond their system would not be opposed directly, but anticipated through defensive infrastructure and cultural redirection attempts. Covert influence was permitted. Open contact was prohibited. No effort would be made to provoke, manipulate, or antagonize them further. The final report concluded with a line that would echo for generations. Humanity is not a threat because of what it wants. It is a threat because of what it becomes when denied. This was not a civilization easily defeated or pacified. It was one forged in entropy, polished by resistance, and honed by conflict until opposition itself became the forge. The final layer of analysis didn't come from military simulations or sociological projections. It emerged from silence, specifically the realization that Earth had never reached out. Despite detecting radio waves, crafting deep space telescopes, and dreaming constantly of life beyond its cradle, humanity remained unanswered. Yet the signals persisted. Music, mathematics, encoded messages, all launched without knowing who might receive them. This was not naivete. It was invitation underpinned by defiance. They cast their voices into a void with no expectation of mercy, only the stubborn belief that being heard mattered more than being safe. For centuries, the galaxy interpreted silence as wisdom, avoidance of entanglements, caution refined by survival. Earth defied that principle. It shouted into the unknown. Not because it lacked fear, but because it accepted it. That defiance was coded into every frequency. Human transmissions didn't beg for rescue or guidance. They carried identity, songs of grief, laughter, war, dreams. These signals were not cries for help. They were declarations. We exist. We think. We endure. To understand the depth of this behavior, Zerthian cultural researchers explored human art. What emerged was a contradiction sharpened into focus. In their darkest expressions, films, poems, sculptures, humans did not glorify victory. They examined failure, sacrifice, and endurance through pain. Their admiration rested not in conquest, but in persistence without resolution. Their greatest heroes were often broken, flawed, or alone, standing not because of hope, but in spite of its absence. This was not cultural despair. It was resolve. Their architecture reflected the same. Monuments rose not just to gods or kings, but to losses, memorials to genocides, catastrophes, and unnamed graves. A civilization that sanctified its wounds, not to forget, but to remember. Each structure was a message to the future. We suffered, but we did not vanish. Galactic analysts struggled with this. Most species celebrated peak achievement. Humanity mourned collectively, and then used that grief to define the next chapter. Even their celebrations, festivals, rituals, commemorations, balanced joy and pain. Victory days often acknowledged civilian deaths. National honors were frequently awarded posthumously. Their culture wove pride and sorrow into the same tapestry. It was not a contradiction. It was identity. In philosophical texts and oral traditions, a recurring theme emerged, meaning forged through struggle. Whether through mythological trials, personal redemption arcs, or spiritual awakenings, the repeated conclusion was that value came not from peace alone, but from surviving what peace could not provide. This was not romanticism of violence, it was reverence for resilience. Every human civilization, regardless of geography or theology, produced a form of this narrative. The galactic observers noted another profound anomaly: forgiveness. Human conflicts, even those stained with atrocity, often ended with reconciliation attempts. Peace treaties followed by cultural exchange. War followed by alliance. Apologies extended across generations. While not universal, this pattern appeared with statistical significance. It wasn't weakness. It was a recognition of shared vulnerability. The same species capable of cruelty unmatched was also capable of restoration without erasure. In their scientific inquiry, humans didn't seek control alone. They sought understanding. Even the most dangerous inventions, splitting the atom, altering genomes, building machine learning systems, originated from curiosity before weaponization. Their desire to know eclipsed their desire to dominate. It made them volatile, but also boundlessly creative. The same minds that engineered explosives also engineered vaccines. The same species that created torture devices also mapped neural empathy. No single motivation defined them. They were a convergence of extremes. The Zerthian Ethics Panel drafted a closing addendum to the Earth Report, not a directive, but a warning. It stated that humanity's capacity for conflict was matched only by its capacity for unity under pressure. When divided, they fractured. When endangered, they fused. Tribes became nations. Enemies became allies. Cultures once hostile developed hybrid identities in response to shared trauma. Earth had evolved not just biologically, but narratively. It taught its children that chaos was a teacher, and survival was a story written in scars. What made humans unique wasn't just that they endured, it was that they created meaning from that endurance. They turned ruin into foundation, failure into wisdom. They didn't wait for permission to exist. They declared their presence through pain and possibility alike. They were not merely survivors. They were authors of their own transformation. In the last page of the archive, an anonymous entry, possibly left by one of the Zerthian auditors, summed up the entire species in 12 words, asterisk. They are the only ones who dare to evolve on purpose. Asterisk, that was humanity's final designation, not predator, not threat, not ally. But potential. Unyielding, unpredictable, and undeniable.